I need to tell this in a way that's honest, but safe. What your father did was violent and wrong. Being pushed down the stairs isn't family drama, it's assault, and you did the right thing by calling the police. Here's your story continuation. When he shoved me, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip. It was rage. Get rid of it, he'd screamed moments earlier, talking about the revised will my grandmother had signed, the one that left her house to me instead of splitting everything equally. I remember the feeling more than the fall. Your one click can keep these stories alive. Subscribe, because every voice deserves to be heard. The shock. The betrayal. The sound of my body hitting wood. When I reached for my phone at the bottom of the stairs, my hands were shaking, but not from pain. From clarity. I dialed emergency services. Not to scare him. Not to threaten him. But because something inside me understood. If I didn't document this now, it would become another misunderstanding. When officers arrived, he tried to minimize it. She tripped. She's dramatic. We were arguing. But bruises photograph well. So do fresh scratch marks on banisters where someone tried to catch themselves. And here's what he didn't expect. My grandmother's lawyer had already filed the updated will with the court, meaning the inheritance wasn't a rumor, it was legally recorded. His motive? Clear. Assault tied to financial gain is not treated lightly. The police didn't arrest him on the spot, but they filed a report. I gave a statement. I took photos. I requested a copy of everything. Documentation is power. The next week, I applied for a protective order. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted distance. When the court hearing came, he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Anger doesn't look powerful under fluorescent courtroom lights. It looks reckless. The judge granted the order. And something else happened that day. The lawyer handling my grandmother's estate informed the court that any attempt to intimidate or harm a beneficiary could impact inheritance disputes. In simple terms, his behavior destroyed any leverage he thought he had. He pushed me for money that was never his to begin with. And in doing so, he pushed himself out of my life. What I learned that day is this. Violence inside a family doesn't become less serious because of blood ties. It becomes more important to address. If this story connects to something you're personally experiencing, please know this. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be believed. And calling the police is not betrayal, it's protection. The police didn't arrest him that night. But the report changed everything. Paramedics checked my wrist and shoulder while one officer photographed the stairs, the railing, the bruises already forming along my arm. My father stood in the living room repeating the same line. She tripped. She's clumsy. The officer didn't argue. He just kept writing. Documentation has a way of making lies look smaller. By morning, the house felt different, not tense, exposed. Every room carried the echo of what had happened. I packed a small bag and went to stay with a friend while the situation was reviewed. The officer had advised distance until things settled. But things didn't settle. 3 days later, I received a call from my grandmother's estate lawyer. His voice was calm, almost careful. I heard there was an incident, he said. I confirmed it briefly. Then he told me something my father clearly didn't know. My grandmother had anticipated conflict over the inheritance. Before she passed, she had added a clause to the will. Any beneficiary who attempted intimidation, coercion, or harm toward another beneficiary could be legally challenged and potentially removed from consideration in related estate matters. It wasn't a punishment clause. It was protection. And now there was a police report attached to it. The lawyer requested copies of the incident report and photos. Once they were submitted, he formally documented the situation with the probate court handling the estate. Within a week, my father received notice that the court had been informed of a potential intimidation incident involving the primary beneficiary, me. That letter changed his tone instantly. He started calling, leaving messages. "Let's talk. This is getting out of hand. We're family." But family doesn't erase paperwork. I applied for a protective order the following week. The hearing was short. The judge reviewed the police report, the medical note about my wrist sprain, and the photos taken that night. My father tried to explain that it had been an argument, that emotions ran high, that I misunderstood the moment. The judge listened quietly before speaking. "Physical force during a financial dispute raises serious concerns," she said. The protective order was granted. That meant he couldn't contact me directly or come near the property that was tied to the inheritance dispute, which included my grandmother's house. The house he had been trying to pressure me to sign over. The irony settled slowly. The very place he wanted control over was now somewhere he legally couldn't approach. A month later, probate finalized the estate transfer. The house title moved fully into my name. My grandmother's small investment account followed shortly after. Nothing extravagant, just enough to secure stability. My father never apologized directly, but his lawyer eventually contacted the estate attorney requesting clarification about whether the intimidation clause could affect his remaining share of unrelated assets. The answer was simple. It already had. The court didn't remove him entirely from the will, but the documented incident heavily weakened his position in any future challenge. Any attempt to contest the house transfer would now be viewed through the lens of recorded aggression toward the beneficiary. In legal terms, it made his case fragile. In personal terms, it made something else clear. The stairs he pushed me down didn't lead to the outcome he expected. They led to evidence. They led to distance. And ultimately, they led to the final confirmation of what my grandmother had wanted all along. The inheritance wasn't just about property. It was about protecting the person she trusted to keep it. I moved into my grandmother's house 2 months after probate closed. The first night felt strange, quiet in a way that wasn't heavy, just still. I walked the staircase slowly, one hand resting on the railing where everything had changed. The bruise on my shoulder had faded by then, but the memory hadn't. What surprised me wasn't the anger. It was the clarity. My father had believed fear would make me surrender, that pressure would make me sign, that blood ties would make me stay silent. Instead, the police report created a boundary, the protective order created distance, and the court record created permanence. We haven't spoken since the hearing, not because I hate him, but because safety is louder than obligation. Last week, I found a small envelope tucked inside one of my grandmother's books, my name written in her careful handwriting. Inside was a simple note. Strength is not about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. I stood in the living room, the one he wanted so badly, and read it twice. The inheritance wasn't a victory. It was responsibility, stability, a second chance at peace. He pushed me down the stairs for something he thought was power. What he didn't realize was this. The moment I called the police, I chose protection over permission. And that choice changed everything.